Alrighty, so in the last video we left off at about the point where we decided we need to start parsing more of the header. Up to this point, all these, well, videos, starting from video number 4, we've been talking about just parsing this first line here. But as you can see, there's actually more data inside of this header than just, the very first part. Now, for example, there's this host key. For example, we might be having multiple different web pages being hosted by the same web server. The type of the content that is coming along, and such as a post request, it might be this, and we have this other boundary information, as well as what is the upload, the content length of what's coming. We may decide based on that certain length value that we are just going to send back a 413 error response. So yeah, this is good. So that's what we're going to be focusing on right now. Let's go ahead and swap over to our module. And we should probably think about how we want to structure this. Number one, we should realize that these other header keys are going to be variable. We don't necessarily want to make a whole bunch of different types of structures or a whole bunch of types for that matter. At least not right now. Later on, maybe we will. So my initial thought on this is that we're just going to create a dictionary of this. So to start out with that, at least, seems a little bit redundant, but that's okay. We're going to do header keys, and then we're going to call the field keys, and it's just going to be a hash map. And we're going to call this a string for our key and string for our value. Cool. So this is what we're ideally returning from a function that goes through and is parsing out those different keys and values contained within our header. The other thing that is worthwhile to look at in terms of this data structure again or in terms of the request, the HTTP request structure, is that every line inside of our header is separated by the character return new line, these two characters that we got right here. Make that big. Oop, probably more than I wanted. All right, so these two characters here. And the only thing within the scanning of the text that indicates that we are no longer inside of the header is we finally get to this double, basically, let's call it a double new line for the sake of things. This pattern. So what we're going to be looking for to see if we have made it to the end of our header is this set of characters here. And again, visually, it looks like this. So it's just a new line, and then an empty new line, and then whatever content of the body. Cool. Let's get started. So we have our header key struct, and that's what we're going to want from. That's what we're going to want as a return from whatever function we run. So say let header keys equal parse header keys. So we're going to do this. We have that get. What is the post form URL encoded? I believe that's the one. Yep, that's the one we want. Let's go ahead and pass that into this function. If we save it, it's going to tell us that doesn't exist. We're going to go ahead and let it generate our signature, clean it up a bit, just as we have with our other functions here. And there's a chance that we won't have any. So I think in this case, it would be appropriate to say, let's use an option type. So let's do option here. So that in case all we really do have is just that one first line of the request. We don't, we won't entirely blow up or just return an empty struct. And that knowing whether or not, we actually get something out of this is potentially helpful down the road as, ourselves and other people are using this particular module. All right, cool. Next, let's go ahead and do this. Let's copy a lot of this logic that we already have. Cool. Let's do, make this small again so that I'm not looking like I'm using a magnifying glass, just trying to use this. And I'm going to close this. All right. So looking at the video that's being recorded here, and I think that should be large enough. Cool. So I'll go with that. Let's copy at least up to this point here, and then we'll do different kinds of hashing, or different kinds of parsing and splitting. All right, so at the very least, we know, actually, maybe we want to do something different. Maybe, yeah, I think this makes sense. Maybe before everything else, we want to introduce a function just to pull out the header. Say if we have 500 bytes, but only the first 200 are part of the header, it would be really useful to be able to just parse that out of the request before trying to do any other filtering on the bytes. So let's go ahead and just make a different function to get the header out. So let's say, maybe let's call it find header in request bytes. Cool. And we're going to call this buffer, do ampersand. We want a reference to an array of bytes. And we're going to return the same thing. Basically, what we're wanting to do is find out what are the bytes of our header, basically. And we want to do that as a function so that we don't have to keep doing it over and over and over and over again, potentially. Yeah, this activity feels like something that we'd potentially be repeating over and over again. So I'm going to just jump ahead a little bit and make it into its own standalone function. So let's also add a limit. Buffer limit and say usize. So this usize type in Rust is basically taking whatever the default architecture size of an unsigned integer is. So if, for example, you're on a processor that still uses 32-bit standard registers or 64-bit or whatever, it will go with whichever is being used by your architecture. This, in general, let's say if you have a machine that uses 64-bit with registers, 64-bit data types are generally faster. It doesn't have to do any subdivision logic or whatnot. So by just having this usize type, it is making that optimization choice for you without you having to think about it. I could also very well say, you know what, I just want to use an unsigned 32-bit integer or a U32, or I want to use a U64 or a U8 or whatever. But for the moment, I'm just going to use usize, and that's okay. And we're going to copy this. Yeah, we are going to copy this for ourselves. Okay, and then we are going to do here. And we don't necessarily care about actually we just want that. And we don't need to store anything more. We don't need to keep it around. I see right here I'm trying to do a vec. But let's just see if it will allow us to return simply a slice out of this. We're going to bump into an issue here. Maybe. All right, we'll go with this. All right, so we have this function here. Now, what we're going to do is find header in the bytes. We're going to pass in post form URL encoded. You know what? I want to call this buffer again, make it consistent across different functions. Let header bytes equal this. So our buffer, and let's say we just want to look up to the first 4092 bytes. That's quite a lot. That's 4 kilobytes. If we have a header that's larger than that, we need to rethink what we're doing in life. Okay, cool. So we have our header bytes, and what we are, oh, you know what, I'm wrong. Absolutely wrong. Absolutely, positively wrong here. Let's do this. All right, we actually do care about that. All right, so let's take this out and delete that. We actually want this. We're going to copy this, put that here, and string data. All right, that's fine. I guess this is fine. We are going to return a string. You know what? I'm not going to fight it. We're going to go with it. The other aspect of this here is we let enter string. Otherwise, we're going to be returning. That's fair. Okay, let's do result. Again, you can see I'm sort of following a very rough map in my head of where we're going. HTTP parse error. All right. So we're setting that, and then what we're trying to do is parse this string. So we're going to go enter string dot split, not split off. I like just trying to be helpful, but it's also not helpful. We're going to split it off based off of that series of characters, and we are going to take the, well, it's funny, I'll let us take the last, but it won't let us take the first. Inth and usize. Okay. Let header equal this option. All right, so this means there is the option that none will be there. Let's do a quick test maybe. All right, so I'm actually curious, if it doesn't contain this, what gets returned? I'm not entirely sure. So I could either modify our code and test it there, or I'm going to do what I like to do, which is go to the Rust playground and this was some previous work that I'm doing that's cached. And instead, what we're going to do is create a test of something. Just let me see if it'll support this or if I need to actually create a main function. Lead build. Yeah, I get that. Note that. All right, looks like it wants us to actually have probably the main function. This error message is, there we go. All right, let's try this again. Let's do, so we have our byte string, let test string. Let's go tester because we're going to do this. ASDF. We don't really care what the contents are, but what we want to see is that, you know what? Hold on, we do want this to be a string. Forgive me. To string, it's fine. And if we do tester split on something that doesn't exist, like rat dot inth 0 that inth 0 print line. We're going to do this debug print formatting, so it'll let us introspect on the type, and we're going to print the output. And let's run that. Cool, so if it doesn't actually find it, it will just return the whole thing. Excellent, perfect, perfect. All right, so let's circle on back here. Header options. We can be confident that we should be able to safely unwrap this. And then we can, okay, header, believe, result, string, so that's still a stir, fine, to string. Alrighty, let's go that. Okay, find header and bytes, we get this back. Let's unwrap. I may regret that, but for the sake of getting this function done, let's go ahead and do that. You know what? I think I'm going to call it quits for this video. To summarize what we've done so far, we created this function. We created an initial scaffold for this function to parse out the header keys, but we went down a bit of a rabbit hole, I think a worthwhile rabbit hole, to just get something that lets us pull out the header. Yeah, all right. So I'm going to stop this here, and we'll see you in the next video.